Hello and welcome back to the channel where I provide regular cricket content on interesting topics. Today's video is the first of two parts where I list what I believe to be the best test batsmen of the 90s. The 1990s saw some of the greatest batsmen in the history of cricket ply their trade. From the technically perfect to the flamboyant stroke makers, the decade had it all. In this video, we will take a look at numbers 10 to 6. I examine their records, their best performances and their X factor. As with any of my lists, I love reading what you all think, so fire away in the comments if you think I have got this right or wrong. Before I get started, there is some housekeeping to cover. The batsman must have scored at least 2,000 runs in the decade. For example, although Viv Richards played Test cricket in the 90s, he can't be part of my list due to scoring the bulk of his runs in the 1980s. All clear, I hope. Let's get started. Number 10. Mohammad Azharuddin. The cricketer turned politician was well into his stride by the time the 1990s hit, having made his debut in 1984. During the 90s, however, was when he did his best work in my opinion. He made a statement of his intent on the decade in 1990 with an 88-ball 100 at Lord's. Former England cricketer Vic Marks called it the most dazzling test century he had ever witnessed. Azharuddin would go on to be a mainstay in the Indian batting lineup, playing 64 tests in the 90s. Over that period he scored over 6,000 runs at an average of 44.1 with 1400s. The Indian great was a stroke player almost before his time in that he would regularly score at more than a run a ball. He scored a 74-ball 100 versus South Africa, equaling the Indian record at the time. Number 9. Michael Slater. I have painful memories of Michael Slater. As a teenager I would wait for the Ashes with youthful hope, thinking that this was the year we would beat the Aussies. Usually by lunch on day one, Michael Slater had put an end to that hope. Slater was an attacking opening batsman in every sense of the word. He would stride out to the crease with purpose and instantly go on the offensive. Slater was particularly strong off of the back foot, jumping on anything just short of a length and dispatching it either to the leg or offside. One performance that stood out of Slater's was when in 1995 against England he scored 123 out of a total of just 184. This made it at the time one of the highest percentages of a team's score attributed to one player in history. Overall during the 90s Slater scored 4,425 runs at an average of 45.2 with 1300s to his name. Number 8. Jimmy Adams. In the first half of his career, Jimmy Adams generated phenomenal statistics. After 12 tests, only Bradman had a better record than his 1132 runs at 87. Although he couldn't keep up with that form, it is easy to forget quite how good of a player he was, particularly in the early 90s. In the mid-90s, however, he suffered a crisis of confidence, a problem that may have stemmed from an unfortunate incident on the 1995 tour of England. Batting in fading light, Adams ducked into a bouncer from Somerset's Andre van Troost and shattered his cheekbone. He would retrace into a more defensive shell following that incident, but he still was a force to be reckoned with. Overall in the 90s, Adams scored 2,326 runs at a very healthy average of 45.6. He scored 500s with a top score of 208 not out versus New Zealand at Antigua. Number 7. Syed Anwar. Majestic timing and placement was Syed Anwar's hallmarks, but it didn't start promising in his test career. In 1990, playing in his debut, Anwar had the less than desired achievement of being out for a pair. But he soon made up for the poor start. He was an opener capable of electrifying innings in all cricket through graceful stroke play rather than brute force. He loved driving through the offside with minimal footwork. He annihilated any bowler offering width outside off stump and was known to be one of the most attractive batsmen of his era. Anwar doesn't just make my list for his runs and average, he makes it for who he scored his runs against. Notably, Anwar averaged 59 against the great Australian team of the 90s, showing he was capable against the very best. Overall during the course of the 90s, Anwar scored 3,366 runs at 46.1 including 900s. Number 6. Andy Flower. Just missing out on the top 5 was the Zimbabwe legend Andy Flower. My appreciation for Flower's ability was articulated in my video on the most underrated cricketers of all time. Feel free to check that video out, but I made a case that Flower is too often forgotten about when debating the greats of the game. Flower was a gutsy player who could go toe-to-toe with some of the best fast bowlers of his era without flinching. Interestingly, he makes this list despite his best career performances being excluded due to them coming in 2000 and 2001. Still though, in the 90s he managed 2,580 runs at an average of 44.5, while making the reverse sweep mainstream. He places so highly due to a couple of reasons. Firstly, he was almost entirely carrying a weak team on his shoulders every time he played. Secondly, it is also very easily forgotten that he was a fine wicket-keeper, something which typically takes a toll on batting performances. So there it is, my first installment of my greatest test batsmen of the 1990s. Be sure to look out for my next video, as it will be rounding out the top 5 with some heavy hitters of the game. As ever, let me know what you think of the list in the comments. Thank you all so much for watching.